Hey, what's going on? So I released a track called Earthbound 2 days ago or 1 day ago. 1 day ago, yesterday. I released a track called Earthbound yesterday, and I made a short breakdown video of the drum and ambient intro to that song. And I had a lot of fun doing it, and I thought it'd be cool to kind of expand upon that and just do a full video recreation, or video breakdown rather, of the song. I always learn a lot when I watch other people do stuff like this, and I thought it could be a cool thing to do just for anyone who's interested or happens to stumble upon it. I don't know. I always pick up a trick or two, and I think it's just a cool way to give back to the music making community online by just doing stuff like this. And it's a lot of fun to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with just a play through the track. I'll kind of walk through the session, click around and stuff while it's going, and then we'll go back to the beginning and we'll kind of talk about it. So that's the track. As you can hear, it's kind of like a drum and bass 90s IDM sort of thing. One thing about that genre that I love / don't love is that it's oftentimes very lo-fi, and I think that has a lot to do with the hardware that was used in the 90s to make this stuff, a lot of low bitrate samplers and things like that. And also the source material for a lot of the sampling wasn't the most pristine quality stuff. I mean, ripping drum breaks off of a vinyl is not the most like hi-fi thing you can do. And using like a lot of those romplers, I mean, those were not the most hi-fi things, but that's part of the charm of it all, in my opinion. But I really admire people who are able to recreate that sound within the DAW using different bit crushing tools and kind of like really getting into the nitty gritty of like how that stuff was made. I think that's really awesome, very admirable. Something that I was trying to do with this track is kind of go in a more of a direction that's more in line with my other music, which is to make it very hi-fi, 3D, exaggerated low end and top end that you wouldn't normally hear in this genre from this time period. I know a lot of modern drum and bass is very hi-fi, super deep bass, super crispy, meant to be played super loud at a festival. So kind of maybe I guess like trying to blend the old and the new with this track. And as with many things, you have your intention when you start off, and then it ends up in some place completely different than where you ever intended to start with. So let's start from the top. So if you watch my breakdown video, I say that the song starts off with this drum loop and a little like ambient texture in the background. That's actually not true. The song starts off with this sort of fade in of this other sound, this like pluck kind of sound, plucking synthy sort of sound. Kind of sounds like this. And all that is I see like some of these things I've done them so long ago or like long enough ago that I don't even remember why, for example, this is a printed track as opposed to MIDI. When I know that the plucks sound here is just an arpeggiator going into a micro tuner to give you 10 notes per octave instead of 12 or detuning them. I'm kind of doing some weird stuff. I don't exactly know why I did this because it doesn't sound that out of tune, but it works with the track. And I'm using this plucky kind of subtractive synth sound, very basic stuff, into a phaser and then into this cool plugin that's in Ableton called Vector Delay. That's just like a weird, like kind of like randomizing delay. I can't actually show it to you because this is all printed in at this point. And then of course I'm going into this Voxengo tube amp plugin, which is just an awesome. I love this company. They make so much cool stuff, and I use it all the time on my tracks. Just for a little distortion, I'm using that, or a little saturation rather. And then of course going to Valhalla Room, classic. One of my favorite reverbs for very like realistic sounds or like hyper realistic sounds. And then from there, just a little EQ, and that's it. And so I printed it back. Maybe I went into an external compressor or something. I don't actually remember. And because then here, again, I'm adding more effects to it. Another sort of like rotary speaker sim phasing thing from this awesome company, Clevgrand, I believe is how you pronounce it. This plugin is awesome. And I'll play you the sound again so you can kind of hear what that's like. And this is an awesome plugin. It has lots of like, you can sort of mess around with the speed, and it sort of like, here, let me loop this. You can mess around with the speed, and it kind of imitates a rotary speaker. It's got kind of a reverb sim in it. It's got an amp sim in it, and then it's got some sort of like stereo widening stuff, and I'm using a lot of that. For EQ, after that, I'm using the PSP E27. This is a recreation of an Avitas outboard. I guess it's not outboard. This is a recreation of an Avitas 500 series EQ, which is itself a recreation of an API style, I think like a 550A, I guess, based on the... But it obviously has way more frequency options available, so it's more of a modern take on that. And that dude Avitas really knows what he's doing. So this is a cool plugin emulating a cool company that I don't think gets enough recognition, which they should get more. And then after that, we're using Shapeshifter from Aberrant DSP. I've been using a lot of this company stuff in my more recent music. It's not really featured that much in this album, But in my next project, I'm going to use actually quite a bit of it. I use it kind of all the time. But this is like a compressor saturation sort of thing. It's supposed to emulate sort of like a cassette compression tape kind of thing. And let's see how much it's doing here. Well, it's obviously giving a lot of level. But it's just really glues things together. I really like it. And then, of course, going into mid-side for some spread on those plucks. Those will come back later in the song, these plucks. I think I just pulled it from the later in the song to move it here to make the intro to the track. And while that fades in, we have, if you watch the short video, you'll know that I mentioned this plugin called treetone that makes my GPU lag for some reason when I have it open. But it's kind of like a randomized resonator algorithm thing. And it's got a lot of little settings you can tweak. But the cool thing about it is that it allows you to send audio into it. And I'm trying to remember exactly how that is being done, like where that setting is on here. Because it'd be silly of me. Oh yeah, it has this like input routing thing. So I'm sending the drum track up here to that. So you'll hear what it does. I'll kind of, I'll play it here. As you can hear right now, it's just kind of like twinkling along in the background. But once the drums come in later, once I bring the drums in, you can hear that it starts to spike and pulse with the drums. I think it's a really like cool effect to create this nice like rhythmic texture that's in the background. So that's just the tretone and the drums. And then what I'm doing here is I'm in the treetone plugin, just animating the spread function, which is essentially changing the pitch. So I can create a little mini chord progression out of it. No fancy effects or anything, just make you some compression. That's it. Awesome little sound. Okay, so let me quickly re-break down the drums. I mentioned that in my I went over this in my my short version of this song breakdown, but I'll just go through it again quickly here for folks that haven't seen that, and so you don't have to go looking for it if you want to know what's going on with the drums. Starts off with this pretty standard drum beat, something from the Ableton library, I think. Nothing fancy. I put it into the repitch warp mode, and then basically made it halftime. It's a point where it sounds like this. It's very close to how it came out in the song, but what I had to do is shift it back an eighth note, so the kick drum is on the downbeat. I just felt that had more bounce to it, and felt closer to what I was looking for the feel of the drums in the song. And in terms of processing wise, on the loop that's all chopped up, I'll loop it here, and we can listen to it. It's a lot of EQ at different points. Some of the things are probably doing contradictory things, but you know, when I'm working on this stuff, a lot of times I'm just like going with it. And as I'm adding more effects, when I feel like I need to take something away or add something, I'll just put on another EQ because it's pretty low CPU usage, and it can get confusing, but I don't know, that workflow works for me. So we start with this EQ here, just kind of working around in the low end, trying to like start to shape the kick drum sound. This is actually really important, this one here. This is another Voxengo effect. I love this company. They do awesome stuff. I am doing a very sharp low-pass filter at 22.3K, basically. And the reason I did that is because when you speed the beat up, a lot of information, frequency information, shifts to out of the audible range. So you get stuff that's happening above 22K. And unless you have oversampling engaged, or you're filtering it out, that information can mess with any harmonic effects you're using. So if that's compression, if that's distortion, if that's saturation, which is kind of the same thing, all those sounds are going to be slightly made weird by the stuff that's happening above 22K. And it's going to overmodulate and start to do things that you're just not expecting it to do. So I just chop all that off. Then we go into a phaser here, very subtle. It's mixed, it's automated rather, throughout the song. So if I'll skip to a later section here, the phaser becomes more apparent. Also, the drums have pitched down for this part. So you can hear more phasing going on there. What's after that? We got drum bus, which is doing all the heavy lifting. Emphasizing the fundamental of the kick drum here, adding a little bit of drive, little tiny bit of transient emphasis, and then R bass, doing more of the same thing. Then another EQ to again kind of fuck around with the low end, take out some resonances I didn't like, and then of course C6, great plugin. I use this thing all the time. It just works. Multi-band compression, again, shaping the kick and snare fundamental to get that sound. Then we go into this limiter, which is limiting, kind of shaving off the super sharp stuff. And then after that, all we're doing is hitting a filter, which is automated throughout the song, and this EQ, which is doing absolutely nothing. I chopped that up, added a little Pharrell-style count-in, and there we have the main part of the song. So that goes on for a bit, and then we have these vocal chops come in over here. And these are just random samples that I have pulled from my library. Chopped them up until they felt right, into a rhythm that felt right. And then what I did is I slowly unmute more stuff as it progresses. We hear more sounds added to the kind of the complexity of the like melody, if you will. Processing wise, not a lot going on besides some basic stuff. Compression, Blue Stripe 1176. I like what this does for vocals. I think it brings out like a lot of the like breathy texture of a vocal. And for this is exactly what I wanted. Then after that, we're going into the beat repeat. A cool little slept on, I would say, Ableton plugin. And I have 2 instances of that going, left and right. But just kind of adding a little extra stuff on there. Then of course we're going to an EQ, little lift on the top, some high pass. And then the only thing after that is I took the gate plugin and I flipped it to kind of use it as like a sidechain compressor. So instead of the sound only opening when the drum hits, the sound closes or like reduces when the drum hits. And the only reason I picked this over the like just using a regular compressor is I find that the settings here works, they're slightly different. It's not just like attack release. You have this hold function, which allows you to kind of like shape just how much of time you're going to spend in that lowest point of compression before the sound comes back after the sidechain hit. So like the drum hits and the sound isn't just ducking for the transient of the drum, it's ducking from the time the transient hits for an unspecified or for a specified amount of time after that, and then comes back. So that's what the hold function does, and it creates a more like jarring kind of sound as opposed to just like regular sidechain compression. We got a bass kind of going on here as well. Nothing crazy really here. I think it's just a little FM, little operator patch with some saturation. That's it. I'm using the FM just to kind of give it a little bit of extra something. And I'm layering a few different sine waves here, it looks like. A few different waves, rather, are labeled. And so, because you can see the algorithm that I've selected is like basically you have one modulator and 3 carriers. And so this one modulator, which is this one, is affecting all 3 of these waves. And these waves are all, 2 of them are sine waves. And then one of them is this kind of like other weird wave. And they're all just mixed together with the same FM source. And then I'm blending that. I'm sending the MIDI to a separate track. And on that separate track, I have an even lower bass, down an octave, just for the ultra low stuff, just so I can control the balance of that all a little bit better in the final mix. So here I'll play that's with the sub. That's without the sub. Subtle, but makes a difference. And then, of course, sidechain compression, just a little bit, ducking to the kick drum, as always. So then we get into the next part of the song, which is where everything really starts to open up and we get more sounds and more instruments going in. And so here we have some new percussion that comes in, the shaker sound. just sort of adding a little bit of texture, driving things along. We get one of my favorite crash cymbals to use. This one is just kind of like a percussive, or like an orchestral, sort of like a guy hitting two cymbals together type thing. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. It gives it a more grand feeling. And sometimes just a single crash hit is like too splashy or too harsh. This like rather, what I mean by that is the sound of the stick hitting the crash cymbal. It's like a little harsh. So this one sounds to me, to my ears, sounds more like a orchestral style, like orchestral style, like slightly different texture. Then we got the bass coming in. A new bass enters at this point. As you can see here, I have this track called Mini. And what that is it's an external instrument, and it's essentially just sending out to one of my outboard synths, which is the Studio Electronics midimini. It's a mini Moog in a rack. Early on, Studio Electronics made them using boards from actual mini Moogs and then retrofitted MIDI onto them. Mine is not one of those. They started making their own eventually because they realized that the mini Moogs, the vintage mini Moogs, which this is I think this is like the 80s or the 90s they started doing this. Those vintage mini Moogs were problematic even then with the tuning and things like that. And so they just started replacing the boards with their own versions, and they sound phenomenal. I don't want to get into the weeds as to what's better or worse when it comes to mini Moogs with the filters and all these things. As far as I'm concerned, it's awesome and it has a lot of knobs and it's fun to use. So that's why I use it. And then you can see I have a chorus track here. And I'll throw a picture of this up on screen too. My Boss CE300 Super Chorus. It's a rack mount chorus effect. It's meant for guitar players because the level input is -20. So it's really looking for like an instrument level input from like a guitar. And that was for back in the day when guitar players had racks instead of just pedal boards. It really was, the 80s were a very indulgent time for music in more ways than one. And so what I really like about this chorus is it's the closest that I've heard to my all-time favorite chorus, which is the Dimension D, a Roland product. I might be wrong about this, but I've heard from some places that the CE300 uses the same chips and the same structure as the Dimension D, which just has more tweakable settings on the front panel. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds pretty awesome. And this song will have a lot of Boss rack-mounted effect all over it because there's the chorus. I also have a delay as well that I'm about to show you right now in one of the main lead part that comes in right here in the song. So we got this lead here. I'll play it soloed. So the source is Poly. This is a Max for Live built-in Ableton synth. I really like this one. To me, it kind of gives me a Prophet vibe. That's just the feeling I get from it when I'm using it. I really like it. It's very plucky, very very sharp. The envelopes are very, very, very like, and so I like to use it a lot for percussive stuff, but excuse me, in this case, I'm also using it as a lead synth. And so what I'm doing is I have two leads here, these two delays, and that is the Boss DE200. That's a rack mount delay, very early digital delay, super gritty, super lo-fi, perfect for this style of music. Even though I am going for more hi-fi sound, it's perfect for this style of music. For this song, it just fits right in. Very mid-rangey. So that's them soloed. I think I'm using a reduced sample rate. So the way the delay works is if you want to get longer delay times, you have to reduce the sample rate. And so you get this even grittier, more lo-fi sound out of the delay. And so I'm using just two of them, slightly different times, left and right, to kind of spread out that lead part. And all of that is going into just some more EQ. A lot of EQ going on here. That's kind of how I mix, is I like make my sounds and then I just EQ the shit out of everything until it all kind of fits together. Right as this section starts, actually, we get this other cool sound. Which then comes back as our melody in the second section of the song. So what we're looking at here, as you can see, there's two layers. One says JV Rhodes, That is a JV 1080. It's a rack mount synth from Roland, early 90s. It's a Rompler, all PCM sounds, but they are awesome. So this is more of like a Bell sort of modified Rhodes sound. Something you might have heard, like an extreme version of something you might hear in like the 80s from a Rhodes, like a real Rhodes, back when they were modding them and shit. And then that's layered with this piano, just nothing fancy. Grand piano sound, a little bit of EQ, a little bit of API going on there, just for that. 8 dB of 7K. Really want to get that sparkle out of it. And then that's all going into this long chain of effects. As you can hear, there's like this really long, dense reverb on there. So what we're starting off is, I can kind of do everything individually because I think it's interesting how these all add up. I'll leave the EQ on at the end just so you don't get confused. So we start off with, here is just the piano going into this like insane parallel processing chain where we got some phaser, we got some the phaser. This is an awesome phaser. This is a Mutron biphase cloned by Arturia in plugin form. This is great, super chewy, super very 70s sounding phaser. It's not super rich and deep to my ears. It can't do that sort of like sweeping thing. It's very the feedback of the phaser is quite aggressive. So it has a very like chewy sound, and I'll play that just soloed. It's like the resonant peaks are very sharp. The other layer going on here is, this is a classic plugin from Sound Toys. We got the freaking Devil Lock Deluxe. Devil Lock Deluxe. It's kind of quiet, but that's like a super compressed version of the sound that I'm blending in pretty quietly with the dry. That's the dry. As you can hear, that's more for the attack. There's not as much sustain. But when I bring in the Devil Lock, we get the perfect balance of the exaggerated sustain that you don't really get from an actual piano with that very defined transient. Then, of course, some extra delay on there. Valhalla delay, and they're ducking. I'm only ducking a little bit, but kind of a dual delay sort of thing. So when you blend that all together, it sounds like this. And then from there, we go into parallel processing with Valhalla Shimmer. Super awesome. Classic sound. I think this is now, you could call this a classic sound now. I think, maybe in like 2010, everyone was using stuff like this all over their electronic music, and now it sounds kind of dated to my ears, but it worked for this song. Especially with something with a lot of transient information like a piano, it really shines in that environment. It doesn't sound super messy, which I like. Awesome. And then after that, we're going into more reverb for even more sustain. And finally, some compression. 1176 FET compression, very specific sound. To my ears, FET compression and FET compression and Veramute compression are like two of the most easily identifiable compression sounds. And this is, I think, a good argument for why using an emulation plugin or a hardware unit can give you advantages or different sounds over just using like a digital stock compressor. Is that the way the compression works? It's something that goes beyond just attack-release ratio controls. It's the way all those three things interact in this style of compression that makes it very unique and makes it a very specific sound. So I think, you can mix an entire song with just digital compressors that you can find stock in your DAW, no problem. But to get more characterful sounds, I do think it actually is necessary to have some more varied tools in your tool chest, because they do things differently, and it gives you something beyond just dynamic control that shapes the sound and makes a specific artistic statement with the processing that you're doing. So I have medium attack, fast release, just to create an exaggerated like boom sound from the. Almost really want to make the everything bloom off of the initial transient. So that's all that. Then we come into this section. A little breakdown. Get just some shaker. We come into this sound here. Which I'll loop so you can hear it. This is one of my favorite sounds in the whole track. This is a preset from the wavetable synth going into a delay that's, I think, at this point in the track, wet only. I don't know why I did it like this. I think it's because I was initially using it earlier in the track, and then I ended up scratching it. So it's really just wet only. We just have this delay sound, which is, again, Valhalla delay. I think the Valhalla stuff is like, I don't know. I don't ever find myself wanting more than this delay, the vintage verb, the room verb, and occasionally I use a convolution reverb, which obviously Valhalla doesn't have one yet. But I think they have the algorithms, they have the know-how. I don't see why I need other reverbs at this point, or delays. It's just got everything, and they're so good. So I'm taking that wet-only delay signal, and then what I did is I printed it through a Eurorack module, which is getting you this sound. It's kind of quiet in the mix, but this is through the Eurorack module microcell. I have nanocell here. I think it's because I had nanocell at the time. Nanocell and microcell are kind of the same, sort of the same thing. They're a variation on the famous clouds module. If you're a Eurorack head, you probably know what that is. And this is just an expanded version of the firmware that's in that clouds module. And so I printed that through, printed the hang drum delay sound through that, and that's how we get this sort of interlude sound. No EQ. And of course, a little compression. Using this BSS emulation from Waves, DPR 402. I have the hardware version of this awesome VCA compressor. Was intended for live use. In this, I'm using it in mid-side mode right now to kind of make the widening delays sort of pop out a little bit more by compressing those more than the center channel, which there really isn't that much information going on there, but it just makes it feel wider. Great little plug in there. I love that. Sounds really good on bass. Sounds very good on vocals, if you work with vocals. So now we get into the big section of the song. The bass comes back in, starting to build up. Sort of where are we going here? We're about to find out. Off a cliff. Into the dark part of the song. Where essentially all we got going on is we got the drums, we got the bass, and then we got down here, this guy. This thing is freaking awesome. So this sound is I think this is a stock Ableton sound. It's called Subtile. It's like an ambient patch, basically. This nice evolving kind of ambient thing. I think it's super cool. And it was perfect for what I was looking for in this song. I am like not afraid of using stock sounds when they are right for the song. Oftentimes, there are a lot of great sounds in there. And they can be very inspiring. So again, a lot of effects going on here. If I kind of mute everything, or sorry, turn off all the effects here. Obviously we get a lot quieter, but we have more dynamic movement, which is not a bad thing inherently. But I wanted it to feel like pummelingly, like a brick wall of just ambient texture. And so what we got is some EQ to sort of pull out some stuff I didn't want. Then we hit the DBX 160. This is a VCA compressor, very fast, very aggressive when you pump it up. Usually it's good for drums. People use it a lot on drums. You can use it on a vocal, guitars as well. It has a lot of applications, but I'm just essentially hitting it with 10 dB of compression, unapologetically. And then from there, we're going into this Big Owl. This is a saturator. Got some drive in there. Got a little bit of EQ. I'm not really using that, mostly just for saturation. The VCA is doing, sorry, the DBX is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. And then we got another EQ over here. And then again, we're hitting this Good Hertz mid-side, which is an awesome, awesome, awesome tool. Very helpful. And so all that we do with this sound as the song goes on, the only kind of change that happens as the track progresses is the pitch, the MIDI note input changes, which gives you dramatic pitch differences. And then I'm using the auto pan over here to create some movement to usher us into the transition. Like that. So we drop down here in pitch. This amazing pluck sound that I mentioned earlier comes back. Here she is. Little ride cymbal sound pops in here. It's called Scoop Ride, SSO. I don't know. Just a sample I found. I think it blends well with the drums. So it pokes out just enough. It's metallic and pingy without sounding fake or too fake. It sounds just fake enough. And I think oftentimes it's about treading that line when making electronic music. Let me go into an even quieter section. The hang drum sound comes back. This is all nanocell manipulation there. Cool shit. And then we hit big section number 2, where the vocal chops come back. This time we got a little pitch shifting going on, blended in, and a little bit of spectral reverb to kind of smear them and make them sound more in the world of this part of the song, because now we're kind of in a different place. And the vocals just being super clean doesn't really fit here. So I wanted to smear it all to create this kind of final section of the song. It almost feels like we're descending into some sort of astral hell before we fall off the edge completely. And then we have the ambient outro, where we get ideas from earlier in the track poke their head out once again. We get some processed drums coming in here. This is the printed version of the beat being just sent through some delay. And then as you hear as it goes on, we get a little bit crushing. Simple stuff. Love a good bit crusher. So awesome. And so here's that sound from the intro again. Comes back. And we got a little melody, return melody from the poly. Little sub bass just kind of riding in there, just a little bit of foundation before it all sort of fades out. And we're left back where we started at the beginning of the song. So that's it. That's the whole song. That's Earthbound. I hope you learned something. I hope you gained something from this. It's fun for me to talk about, and I hope it was fun for you to watch. I've got more tracks coming soon, so stick around. I'm going to do breakdowns of maybe everything that I've ever released, because that would be awesome and fun. So until next time, see you later. Not my best snap. There we go. That was a good one.